Hello everyone and welcome to a new GigaM webinar. Today we'll talk about integrated data protection strategy for post-COVID scenario. I am Enrico Signoretti and I will be joined today by Ugo Parra, Senior Director of Product Management of StorageCraft. Hi Ugo, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Enrico. I'm delighted to join you in this webcast.
So maybe before starting the webinar, we can give a little bit of information about StorageCraft and also about you. So just to have a little bit of background.
For sure. Thanks, Enrico. Greetings, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you all. I actually lead the data protection product management team at StorageCraft. StorageCraft is a data protection and disaster recovery solution vendor. It's been in business for 17 years, and we've been offering a combination of on-prem and cloud solutions for folks that want to protect their data and their systems. My main responsibility at StorageCraft is to deliver an integrated hybrid and pervasive data protection platform. So the subject of this webcast is very close to my heart, and again, delighted to be with you all.
Fantastic. And also, I have to add that, I told at the very beginning that I'm Enrico Signoretti, but my role here is that as a host, is that I'm a GigaM analyst and I cover data storage in case you missed some of my reports on gigam.com. So let's start with the agenda here. And today we will have an interesting discussion about the evolution of data protection. So what changed in the last 20 years, especially in the last few years. We'll talk a lot about data silos, how to avoid them, why it's important to avoid them, the role of the cloud on this new era of data protection. And of course, we'll talk extensively about best practices and why an integrated data protection will help you to face the challenges that we see also in these days, but actually several types of challenges that can occur in our day-to-day life. The last part of the webinar will be a question and answer session. So we will answer to the question that you will post during the webinar. But again, this is a very interactive webinar. So we will start immediately after this slide with a poll, and we will add a couple of other polls just to understand better the mood, understand what you're doing with the technology, and we will discuss also about this. So feel free to ask questions. You have a panel on the right of your screen, probably the GoToWebinar panel where there is the question tab. Just click there and fill up the form with your question, and we will answer them during the webinar. So again, let's start with the first poll. So how would you describe your infrastructure today? So there are several options today. So you can have one primary location with limited needs for remote location mobile devices. Distributed, I mean, on primary location plus remote offices and mobile devices. Hybrid, a little bit of everything, I would say. So on premises, IaaS cloud, mobile devices and remote location, or you are already in the multi-cloud with IaaS and SaaS on-prem, remote offices and mobile devices. Or maybe you are just cloud only. I mean, multiple clouds, distributed and non-premises infrastructure. So how would you describe your infrastructure today? Let's start the poll and see what is happening. So just put your answer in your in the pop-up window that you saw happening. We are collecting the answers right now. I mean, in your opinion, Ugo, what do you see the most among your customers?
Yeah, we asked this question, Enrico, of a lot of our customers, and many of them self-identify with a hybrid option. And then what I find curious is we start talking about SaaS, right? And we start bringing up Office 365, Salesforce, G Suite, Adobe, Marketo, all this service now, different solutions that are out there that are SaaS based, and many of them then start saying, we are a multi-cloud organization. So it's what comes first to mind, and then as people think more about it, then their idea of themselves changes just a little bit. It's pretty interesting.
Okay, yes, this is more or less my experience. We are still waiting a couple of more answers because closing the poll. As soon as we have them, I will give you an idea of the results. Here we go. So we have that. Yeah, so it's 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3 about distributed, hybrid, and multi-cloud. It's interesting because this is actually a little bit different from what we see. I mean, we see a lot of people doing hybrid at the moment, and multi-cloud as the next evolution. But it's interesting because sometimes it's also true that some companies use the cloud, but they actually don't understand or they don't know that the backend of some of the products that they use actually are cloud and are cloud based. But anyway, let's go on with the presentation. So first of all, I want to talk about the evolution of data protection. Okay, and it is very important because we started several years ago. When I started, doing this job, we had computers. I mean, we are talking about the 80s, early 90s, end of the 80s and the early 90s. And there was this concept of backup, and you were able to do backup during the working hours. So everybody could stop a few minutes or even sometimes, an hour, and just make a copy of your data and have it, stored locally. There was not a lot around backup at that time, and it was important, but it was part of the job. Now everything is transferred. So we have our headquarters, we have our central data center, and over time things changed radically. So we started to having a distributed organization, remote offices, remote location where we had people working. But actually then between 2007 2010 we started seeing the mobile devices, not only laptops but also smartphones, becoming more and more relevant. Up to now, you can switch on the same application between several types of devices and continue your work, changing a few things on an iPad, for example, and then editing back on a PC. And then the cloud happened. Okay, we started with at the very beginning with infrastructure as a service, then storage as a service, SaaS with Office 365, now Microsoft 365, Google Docs, and all the others. So a lot of complexity. But what is really important is not just what happened, in the several types of tiers that we had, but also how data started to move around. Okay, so we had this concept of edge that in many cases include remote offices and smart devices and laptops, the core, which is our data center, on-premises data center, and the cloud. And the very beginning, when we started implementing the edge, so data started to move from the core to the edge. Now think about bank agencies or remote hospitals. Okay, so in a large organization with multiple hospitals, and I saw more and more application during the years producing data more at the edge and storing data also at the edge, because it was complicated to move data around. It was expensive, and one connection were very expensive. So people try to rebuild a small data center in a remote location, or sometimes in a broom closet, but that was the case. Okay, and then the cloud happened, and we saw some data move to the cloud. It was not a process that moved happened overnight. Actually, it took years and years. Okay, so the first cloud implementation, if you think about Amazon S3, was 2006, and we are 2020, and we are still talking about hybrid cloud. Okay, so there is this back and forth of data that is going on, and then the edge started talking directly to the cloud. Okay, think about Microsoft 365. So even if you are in a remote office, you are saving data to the Microsoft cloud, for example. And well, what happened? People found out that the cloud is expensive, and we started seeing in the last year, 2 years, a lot of repatriation projects, a lot of projects where you start considering the cost of the cloud against the cost of your data center. So the situation changed a little bit. Okay, and then if we start thinking about what happened in the last 3-4 months, boom, all in a sudden, so the code disappeared, and disappeared just because you didn't have access to your office, and you started to create more data at the edge, in the cloud, consuming data from everywhere, producing data everywhere, but not in the core. This was a major change, and it was disruptive for many processes in a lot of organizations. I have my wife, for example, she moved in a matter of weekend from her office to an home office, and she was not used to that. Now after months, you can say she loves working from home, unfortunately for me, but that's another thing. And she started changing the processes. Okay, so her computer was not important because everything was in the NAS server of the company. Actually, now most of the documents are locally saved in her PC, for example. So and they were not using Office 365. Now it's everything Office 365. Everything changed, and her company struggled to keep data protected, to keep data secured, and to give the quality of service that the user deserved. Ugo, I have a question for you. Did you see a similar behavior among your customers? So what happened during or before and during the COVID-19 crisis?
Yeah, this has been really interesting for us, Enrico, and in particular that top arrow that goes, that connects edge to cloud. Right, about a year and a half ago, we started thinking that that was going to be the model that was going to win or was going to be very prevalent. And we were actually talking to a lot of partners that were and customers that were a bit suspicious of that, right? Not quite ready for it. And then suddenly we had this COVID event, and everyone is turning like, there's got to be a way for us to keep everything safe and the same level of productivity without us having to have personnel that are taking care of things right in our core space, and being able to enable everyone who's working around the edge and have access and be able to have all that data and all that workload protected properly, even if they're just interacting directly with the cloud. So now we are actually developing products at StorageCraft with this premise that that connection between edge and cloud, even when it's skipping the core in some instances, is something that is going to be where the puck is traveling. So yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, but certainly something that we're seeing a lot more of and more acceptance, right? In some cases, a bit of a cultural change. People are just used to thinking about a certain way of how they protect the data. And now they're starting to think, you know what, this is not only viable, but a necessary approach to protecting our information. So yeah.
Yes, and we think I don't know who said that, but actually I read that in the last 2 months we saw the same amount of digital transformation or even more than in the last 2 years. So many companies started to focus on digital transformation. They changed their processes because they were forced to do it, and it's incredible. And there is another fact. I mean, we are somehow, at least here in Europe, for example, or in the East, where the crisis started first, the pandemic, the virus spread earlier. Okay, now we are reopening more businesses, enterprises, and everything is going back to a scenario that we had before the crisis. So you have to change all the processes again, okay, and return to something. Well, we call it the new normal. In fact, you have, you know, a more dispersed enterprise now, with still some people working from home, but actually some are at the core, and the cloud is still very relevant for everybody. So you need to create this flexible sort of processes, and use applications and tools that make it happen. I mean, you need a flexible IT strategy, not only on data protection, but actually data protection, because data protection is one of the most important, probably the most important asset of your company now. Now you have to find a way to react to these changes that are happening quite often. So how do you protect your data, okay, in this ever-changing scenario? Well, there are two options actually. One is simple and dedicated solution. I mean, so you buy a backup solution, a data protection solution that just solves one single problem, okay? Or on the other hand, you can think about an integrated data protection strategy. I'm not here to say that everything is perfect with integrated data protection strategy, because some organizations, especially the very small ones, okay, can benefit from a simple dedicated solution. Why? There are pros and cons, as I said, and when we talk about when we talk about simple and dedicated solution, it's optimized and efficient. Okay, so it's designed to solve a single problem, and everything that is designed to solve a single problem usually does it better. And of course, it's easier to adopt for the same reason. I mean, you don't have to think about everything. You have to think about a single problem. You have to think about something small, so less data to manage, minimal number maybe of servers or clients. So it's easier. Everything is easier, and it's less expensive. Yes, at the beginning, acquiring this kind of solutions, you know, because they are less complex. They are also less expensive in general, and then there are the, you know, the disadvantages. Okay, so this is the first time I mentioned data silos today. We will go deeper into this, but you create data silos. I mean, every time you adopt a single, a different solution to solve a problem, then you create a data silo. Okay, if you are backupping your cloud instances and you are doing it in the same cloud where you are the cloud instances, everything is simple, but actually everything is segregated. Okay, the same goes for your mobile devices. If you are backing up your devices and we are choosing a solution that does only that, you know, it's okay. But you know, how do you search your data, or how do you can relate all the activity of a users? How can you be compliant, for example, with all the regulation that we have? So everything becomes more complicated. And of course, in the end, this creates higher TCO, so total cost of ownership. We said it's less expensive at the beginning, but actually you need a lot of training on different solutions. You need people knowing different approaches and so on. So it becomes, you know, really complicated. As I said, it could be a solution, especially if you have a low budget and you have a lot of people working with you. You know, sometimes it's just a school district or something like that. Could be good, but again, it's complicated. I don't know your opinion on this kind of solution, Ugo. Can you add something on this?
Yeah, I think this is right, and a lot of our customers that have gone this route is sort of out of necessity, right? Some of them didn't have the luxury to look ahead five years on what they're going to need. Many of them got to this space because of mergers or acquisitions, and they find themselves with all this, diverse solutions, and trying to manage that, Enrico, is, like you said, very problematic for many of them. And not only that, but the net result is that their data is less secure, right? Because the lack of a consolidated view of everything. So everything here that you list is absolutely right. But I would add that there are also, because of the all the just moving parts that are not integrated, they end up having a problem with not being as secure, as protected as they would if they had a single view of everything that they care about.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I should have done it. Security is another key point. So let's talk a little bit about integrated data protection. So some of the benefits of the simple solution are the disadvantages. I mean, of the integrated data protection strategy. Of course, it's a little bit more expensive, okay, because you have to think ahead. So you have to plan a little bit in advance a few things when you adopt these kind of solutions, okay? And the other thing is that they are more complex to adopt, okay? So you have to think about, even if you are starting to use it only for one of your environments, you have to think a little bit in advance for all the rest. So the good planning is necessary. But I have to say that the flexibility is priceless, because as soon as you adopt a solution that can protect all your data across all your environments, okay, you start adopting something that allows you to do more things, and of course in a predictable way. It's another great advantage is that you don't create data silos. As we said a moment ago, security could become a great issue, okay? And to avoid that, if you have a consolidated view of your data, or even if you are a physical consolidated view of your data, so in a single repository, you know where your data is. You can query the data. You can do a lot of things, and we'll talk about what you can do. But actually, it's important because even if you can do today, even if you are not ready for that, so just the fact that you have a large repository, you are creating a big data lake with all the data that is present in your organization, and better TCO. So the country of a series of simple solutions, which in the overall picture, they are no longer simple because there are many. It's better TCO. So you need less people to manage the infrastructure, but also similar processes to back up everything, and similar process to retrieve your data, and so on. So everything becomes easier to manage in the long run. Ugo, maybe you want to add something also on this one.
Yeah, yes, Enrico. Just a quick comment on this one. I think it has traditionally been the thought of customers that if they're going to adopt a platform that is for more sophisticated customers, right, that have the foresight or maybe the deep pockets to do that, and it's because that has been traditionally the case. I think StorageCraft is trying to turn that around in two aspects. One is that we are looking at the platform the data protection platform that we are developing and building our solutions on top of is such that you don't have to rip and replace everything that you want to start doing, right? You can start using the platform in the areas where you want to introduce some of that value, and then increasingly roll it out eventually to use it everywhere you need. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is a lot of vendors or platforms aim at having customers lock in, right? If you're going to use a platform, then you are limited on the storage that you're going to use. You're going to be limited on our data center versus your data center, and et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that we are StorageCraft is keen on is in that flexibility that you list here as point number 3, in that you can roll out the platform and still integrate with all this other product and all these other solutions, leverage your own data centers when it makes sense, leverage the cloud when it makes sense, leverage StorageCraft cloud when it makes sense. And I think that even improves that TCA and overall TCO in the long run, and it's something that I think is got to become expected from vendors as we go forward.
Yeah, and just another a small thing to what you said at the very beginning. We sometimes think about small organization don't need an integrated data protection strategy, but actually it's not true. Even if you have a small organization, you have everything that we mentioned. I mean, you have some storage and compute on your premises, you have some cloud services, and your mobile devices. So think about it. I mean, it's just how the solution that you are buying can start small, but actually that's a problem of the type of platform you decide, the product, and not the need. Okay, so that's just to point out that there is a solution for everybody. And think about, I want to make a couple of examples here. Disaster recovery is something that is it comes to my mind very often, especially lately with all the things that happen. And this year we saw everything, and maybe we are still half, in the middle of this year. You don't know, asteroids, aliens, whatever can happen after all the disaster that we already had. So think about disaster recovery, okay? And of course, if you start thinking about operating multiple disaster recovery solutions, but maybe because they are easier to buy, or maybe because you want to protect differently each single platform that you have, it becomes crazy, okay? Where you are putting your data, what are you doing with it? I mean, it's totally crazy. The recovery process, which is the most important part of disaster recovery, okay? So it's not the disaster. I mean, everybody buys in the disaster recovery things because it's like being assured that, having an assurance policy, but it's not that something that you hope for, okay? But if it happens, it's the recovery process that is the important thing. And having different solutions means you have different processes to recover your data. But you're already in a critical moment and you have to think about different processes. It can't work. I mean, it can't work efficiently. So multi-disaster recovery as a service is a nightmare. I mean, yes, as you mentioned, Ugo, earlier, you can choose different clouds for your backend. That's okay, but choosing different disaster recovery as a service solutions, for example, again, because maybe you're doing you are having your edge and your core that are protected in different way. It's a nightmare. I mean, sorry. Do you have something to add on this? Because I think that this is just the right example to bring attention on why the integrated data strategy is important.
Yes, Enrico, you're not exaggerating when you say that this can be a nightmare. I talk to a lot of customers that are the role of owning that disaster recovery plan, right? And when I'm having lunch with them and the guard is down, I usually ask them the question, describe for me your process, your DR process. And the question that comes back, and the question that comes back to me often is, recovering from where? Right? And that to me points into a huge breakdown, right? If your process is different, right? Whether you're coming back from this one data center or you're trying to recover from another place, chances are that as you're running around in a critical situation, right? High tension, that you're gonna make mistakes and it's going to delay the time that it takes for you to be back on your feet. And so this consistent experience is key to it. The other thing that comes up from those lunch discussions is I often ask them, right, just between you and I and a sandwich that we're eating, how confident are you that this plan will work? And what I have come to learn from many of these guys is that, you know what, it's a check. It's a checkbox. I had to check. I had to have this written down, but the chance of this working in a real situation is maybe 50-50, and that's not good enough, right? And so a solution that allows you to test this, whether it's on the cloud, whatever it is, and you're constantly making sure that your recoverability is highly likely. I'm talking 99% likely. I think is really important for this plan. So those are the things that I have observed here, Enrico.
Yeah, and let's go on the next section. But before, another quick poll. So, what were the major challenges during the COVID-19 lockdown? This is a question that I asked to so many people, and I had the most varied, answers. So, lack of flexibility and IT infrastructure reconfiguration, new security risk and less control over the infrastructure, data created at the edge and in the cloud, temporary solutions becoming the new normal, unfortunately, I would add, and all of the above and more. I mean, it really depends on the kind of organization that you have. We saw so many different answers on this. Maybe you have you had a similar poll with your customers, Hugo. So what do they say?
Yeah, it's the experience that we've had during this time has two things that we have observed, two phenomenons, and I think they're probably this reasons that you list here are behind it. One is, and by the way, this one has started even prior to it. We were seeing a spike of failover to our cloud. It was a significant spike. I mean, many times over what we had seen before, and a lot of that had already been driven by ransomware. People were just failing over to our cloud in an increased amount, and with COVID, that just continued that pattern. So that's one thing that we've seen. The other interesting phenomenon that we've seen during this COVID time is that we are driving more business to protect VMs than physical servers during this time. And I think people are realizing that that managing things in virtual platforms and infrastructures is something they can do better remotely than having physical servers to take care of. So I think virtual infrastructures were already heading in that direction. But I think this situation is probably going to even push us farther that direction. And I think our business need to be there to support that.
Okay, let's see if okay, so we have the results coming up, and wow, 50% temporary solution becoming the new normal. That was not something that yeah. No, I heard, especially at the very beginning, a lot of organizations implementing, measures that they are still using, and of course, this is something that happens. It's interesting also that they experienced the new security risk and less control over the infrastructure,
yes.
which is something that I hear very often, and yes, all the others are less, let's say, seen also in the field from me. So I totally agree with what we found here, and it's incredible, how many organizations had to work overnight to find solutions, and how these solutions are becoming more and more used across the organization. Sometimes in the positive way. I mean, the SaaS application that were just introduced in the company and now used by everybody. I think even for teleconferencing, like Zoom or Microsoft Teams, things like that. It's incredible how things have moved differently now. But very good. Let's continue with the presentation then. And so the next thing that I want to touch is data silos. Okay, why we have to avoid data silos? I mean, this is very important. In my recent reports about unstructured data management, I use these graphics where I describe the flow of data in their structured data management. If you start from backup process, okay, you of course collect data from everywhere, from your mobile devices on the core and in the cloud, wherever you have your data, you are just collecting everything. Okay, so you have a data discovery, the most powerful probably data discovery and collection tool. Okay, you're collecting everything. So you can start cataloging and indexing. And the first thing that you can do, you can search across all your organization. So you can search data across your organization. Maybe it's not a sophisticated way to search data, but actually you can start. Then you can do a lot of other things, include analysis. You can think about analyzing trends about what is happening on your storage. So you can see that something is happening, so you are producing more data than last year, and maybe you will need to upgrade your storage area network before that you planned. But actually you have time to do that because you see the trend, and you say that not in 3 years, but in 2 years you need a new storage area network, so you can do some capacity planning better. Or you have teams that are producing more data than others, or having anything else. I mean, there are so many things. You can discover that you have some orphaned data. Maybe somebody left the company and nobody owns that data anymore, or dark data. You know, how many people are storing movies in their home folders, things like that. I mean, everything. Okay, and then you can take actions. Of course, there are simple actions like for example, infrastructure information lifecycle management. So you can decide to move data to slower storage, maybe cheaper storage, because you see that some projects are not really active, and you don't need to provide them the best systems that you have in your infrastructure, or maybe you're seeing quite the contrary and you want to move this data back to something that is more accessible, and so on. Or compliance. You can check the content of the files to see if there is something wrong. I mean, you're storing data that you shouldn't store, maybe personal information, credit card numbers that you don't want to have in clear but encrypted. Okay, this is a way to start doing these kind of things if you have the right tools to do it. But again, what about finding that you are under attack for ransomware, for example? So what happens if 10% of your files are encrypted in one day? Isn't it strange? Would you like to have an alarm about that? Because this probably leads to a ransomware attack, so you can stop everything. You can find where the attack is really happening, so in which system, and you can stop the spread of the attack. Okay, but there is even more. Okay, and I'm not exaggerating. So there are several vendors and initiatives working on data augmentation. Okay, in the moment that you analyze your data, you can start you can put tags around on your files so that you can reuse them and search for tags. So group your files for additional work, maybe big data, maybe machine learning. Think about all your files that contains video, classify the content so that you can search all the videos that in your organization are produced about machinery. I mean, video manuals, for example, or things like that. That you can think about any sort of use for your data again. When I think about search, okay, and when I think about data augmentation, there is another use case that, for example, could be, look, I look into my files, I index all of them, and then everything becomes searchable for the content, so that if somebody in your organization built a document and you can reuse it, you just save time, because you're searching for a document that has some characteristic instead of the file name. So potential use cases are a lot. And Data silos prevent consolidation, which is necessary to build this kind of actions in the future. And the other thing is data consolidation can be virtual or physical. We mentioned it already. I mean, you can have a consolidated view of your data, or you can just have a physical repository. It really depends on the architecture of the product that you choose, and there are benefits for each one of the approaches. But this is very powerful. Ugo, I want your opinion on this. I mean, I'm a fan of this concept of data management and avoiding data silos for building something on top of the data that you anyway store and protect. What do you think?
Yes. No, I love this diagram and this concept. Our CEO is fond of saying all data is not created equally, right? And what that means is that the business value, the dependency of the business on a specific availability of a data actually should determine, right, where you store it, what SLAs you're looking, what RPOs and RTOs you're assigning to that, and having this analysis done and being able to have intelligent logic applied to that is only possible if you have a way to, if not consolidate, certainly federate that data, right? You need to know where it's at. You need to know the rate at which it's changing and where it's moving and how often it's being accessed, the content, right? All those things are can be fed into analytics. We started a product a few years ago to test some of that analysis, and we're expanding that so that as more data comes under our purview, right, that we're able to make some of this intelligent decisions, or at least assist our customers in making some of this intelligent decisions. So this is the future, Enrico, and I think it's important for people to be thinking in these terms for sure.
Yeah, and again, so there is another important thing that we mentioned at the beginning. Okay, the cloud. Okay, we always talk about the cloud, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, etc., etc. But actually, the cloud, when we talk about data protection, could be three things. Okay, the cloud could be a source. Okay, so the source of your data. It could be a target, but most importantly, it could be an operating platform. Okay, so don't think about the cloud as a place where your data goes or where your data comes from, but think also about it as the system that helps you to manage your data. And why I'm saying that? Okay, because it's important to think about data protection differently than in the past. We have data that is created everywhere, accessed everywhere, consumed everywhere, and we need to protect it everywhere. So there is no longer a single location. So first of all, many vendors are thinking or working on SaaS-based tools and user interfaces. Okay, so yes, you could have your appliance deployed locally, okay, but think about managing it locally, especially if you have 100 locations, okay? It's not that easy. I mean, yes, you can connect with SSH, we can connect via web in your internal network or whatever and manage each single one. Or you can even have a single management console that is located in your data center. But what about a management console that you don't even have to manage? I mean, you don't even have to install or upgrade or everything. No, you just have a SaaS-based tool like Gmail, like any other SaaS-based tool that you can access. Okay, that gives you everything. Okay, it's just easier, and every single new feature that is added to this platform comes when they update it, so you don't have to do anything. So it simplifies operation, of course, because it's a web interface and it's always available. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to think about managing the piece of infrastructure to manage the rest of the infrastructure. So everything comes easier. And of course, it's easier to keep a consolidated view of data because if you have, as we said, a federated view or a consolidated view that is virtual because you have several repositories. Okay, you have a single point that is always accessible, or is more accessible than a single location. Okay, especially if you don't have good connectivity from some of these locations. So this is actually simplifies again all the mechanisms that are around data protection and data management. And also there is this service part. I talked very often about searching data, okay? But you don't want to search your data for your users, okay? If you're a sysadmin, you can stay all the day on the phone, say, okay, what are you searching for? Okay, I can search it for you, I can retrieve the file. The more you adopt these new services, new data management tools, the more you want your user to use them directly. Okay, so self-service becomes more and more important. And last but not least, disaster recovery as a service. Again, we're talking about having an holistic view of your infrastructure, and disaster recovery is part of your infrastructure at that point. So you want to be sure that all the location you have, all the system you are protected in the same way. And of course, having this user interface that is common to everybody, and no matter where you have your system located, you can go to the cloud and you solve your problem. So it again simplifies all that. And all of this, we said it at the very beginning, SaaS-based tools are just easier to implement and for the data management. So Ugo, I think that also StorageCraft has something in going in toward this direction, right?
For sure. Of this list, I like to pick on the DRaaS, disaster recovery as a service piece in here. This is something that many of our customers are looking for, right? And they're always having to weigh this decision of, okay, if I really want to plan for disaster recovery on my own, right, and I want to have my data centers, am I really going to have a complete duplicate of my operating environment somewhere else, just in case I need to fail over and continue my operation? And we find this, many of them start saying, well, let's try to optimize that. Let's try to figure out, let's assume that everything is not going to go to heck at the same time. Maybe one site one day, the other site the next month, and they're trying to estimate what that will do, because tying down that capital is just something that is really hard to do for most organizations. When you move that workload to the cloud, all that goes away, right? Because it's on demand. It's a utility. When you need it, you're going to use it. And if you need to virtualize the entire system, then so be it, right? And so that elasticity of cloud is really, really key for that. What then the problem becomes is, am I going to be on my own to do everything in there? And what hidden costs, right? Because everybody looks at what's really inexpensive, because that's what all these cloud providers tout, right? But if I want to get my data out, if I want to run an extended time virtualized, if I need to have a specific IP address or networking needs, how do I take care of that? And that's where StorageCraft puts a veneer on top of that in offering that as a service, so that you have predictable costs, you have predictable functionality, and basically, you're guaranteed that your environment is going to be able to recover, fail over with the scalability that you need, without having to, yourself invest on that capital to be there all the time. And so this is something that we're very fond of, and we'll continue to offer, enhance our offerings so that they're running on other cloud providers as well as our own. It's a great growth business for StorageCraft.
Yeah, very good. And I forgot one point, but actually I mentioned it at the very beginning, so it was easier to update, of course. And what's your opinion about integrated data protection? This is the last poll of the day before going into the question and answers section. So, and I want to know this because we're talking about integrated data protection, how it could be done, and the advantages of not creating data silos and so on. So I'm already looking to implement an integrated data protection strategy. I'm still more comfortable with point solutions, more efficient, less expensive. I see the potential benefits, but my organization is not ready. It could be. I mean, it takes a lot of planning at the very beginning. I need to learn more about it and understand potential lock-ins. And that's the way we operate already. So let's start the poll, and maybe we can start commenting on it. I mean, it's this is an interesting discussion that I have with my clients, and the answers vary a lot. I mean, it really depends on the type of organization, on the legacy stuff that they have, and you know, processes. So for the answer is different for every organization. What do you find among your customers, Hugo?
Yeah, you know, it just turns out that for most organizations, all the systems that they would look at replacing are not on the same schedule of their life expectancy, right? And so it's difficult for them to just think about, hey, I'm gonna rip and replace all this stuff with this kind of platform approach to it. And I think what works best in those scenarios is to roll out, choose a solution that is going to give you the flexibility to roll this out incrementally, and that it will assure coexistence with your current investment, right? So as it you know, reaches its end of life, you can remove some of those systems and bring them into, while you're already getting some of the benefits of having a consolidated view of everything that you care about. And at the end of the day, you know, the dollars need to add up, right, as you move in this direction. But starting in that direction, I think, is really important. Some people get paralyzed by this analysis and this worry that is going to be a huge lift that never gets started, right? I think just getting started with the right solution and then incrementally heading that towards that goal, I think, is really important.
No, yes, I didn't mention that, but you are totally right. I mean, the common sense is the best thing. So starting with attacking the most critical of your problem, and then going on with the implementation with less critical areas, and it's the best way to start with every new solution if possible. Backup could be this. Right this. I mean, you're just adding a new platform, and from there, if the strategy is to consolidate, you consolidate on that platform. So here are our answers, and well, I'm quite happy that most of our attendees see the benefits and want to learn more about it. So we're talking about 70%, and I'm happy about it. And of course, there is still a minority that is you know, comfortable with a point solution. Maybe for their processes is okay, but again, the fact that organizations are interested in integrated data strategy, they see the benefits of what it can do with the data manager that comes along the way. It's very interesting. So do you have something to add to this, Hugo, before going in on the question and answers?
Not really. This just makes sense, right? I think people feel and realize the needs, but it just becoming more educated, knowing what options are out there, and maybe seeing an outline of other folks that have done it and lessons learned, right? And that's something that will probably get some of these folks to get heading in the right direction. Makes sense.
Okay, fantastic. So question and answer. We have already a couple of questions. But again, if you want to ask more, there is a panel ready on the right of your screen where you can insert your question. So the first question is, we will see a day when all backups go directly to the cloud. This is a very good question. Maybe we can split the answer into, I mean, yes and no. From my point of view, there are solutions that are more and more SaaS based, but from my point of view, it's highly likely that we will see more and more of this federated view of the data, and with data coming from several different repositories. Sometimes they are local repositories, sometimes they are cloud repositories, but you see them as a single in a single domain, and that's more probably what is going to happen. But again, the approaches are different. So there are solutions that will keep data still on premises, and other that are pushed for cloud only. I mean, but for me, it will be hybrid from this point of view. What do you see as a trend, Ugo?
By the way, I agree with you, Enrico. I think there's always going to be some use cases for which you need to have local copies of your backup, and people are going to do that. But I do think that the move right now is to have more of the backup data to go off-prem, and not have any actual copies, as people become more reliant and more comfortable with not only the capabilities of the cloud, but the overall experience and SLAs that come with that. I think that's the direction. And by the way, that is the having the 3-copy thing in the backup world is so ingrained into many of our processes that it's hard for some people to break that. But what I would say is that that's something that we're going to see more of, and people should be willing to at least test it, because there's great benefits in not having to manage storage at those remote locations, maintain it, update it, expand it. Right? There's great benefits if people could prove the concept of backing up direct to cloud, direct to some central location. And so I think we're going to see more of that as protocols and resilience improve. I think there's going to be more of that, but there's also going to be a case for hybrid in the long term.
Yeah, and then we have another question, that is, what's the biggest challenge with using the cloud for disaster recovery? In my opinion, the biggest challenge could be that there are several options. Of course, when we talk cloud, we can talk about major service provider or dedicated service provider, local service provider. Well, the biggest problem I see with the major service providers is that they love to keep your data. Okay, so pushing your data to the cloud is also always very cheap. Retrieving your data could be very expensive. Okay, so the egress fees, these kind of things can kill your cloud bill very quickly, for example. And having a dedicated solution for disaster recovery, for example, with a linear price or more predictable price, maybe could help to solve this kind of problem. Also, dedicated solutions are designed to support that specific kind of workload, and at the end of the day, it could be more flexible for that specific workload, as well as cheaper in general. I mean, less expensive in general. So, what do you think about the difference between the big cloud providers or local and specialized cloud providers for this kind of solutions?
Yeah, Enrico, I think you nailed it. I think it's a surprise factor of, hey, when I did the math for my DRaaS approach, I didn't take into account how expensive this or that was going to be, and now this doesn't look viable. And then you saw that arrow coming back from the cloud for some workloads, just because they didn't turn out to be, people hadn't done the full analysis. And so what StorageCraft's view of this is that disaster recovery really needs to be done, on public cloud, but more as a service, right? Just like you don't have to think about all the hidden costs when you're using other SaaS. We are building disaster recovery on top of some of these clouds, so that you get all the functionality, self-serve, everything, and the benefits of that public cloud, elasticity, all the power that you need, configurability, without having to have that risk of those hidden costs or price costs that you mentioned. And I think that's the right mix going forward.
Okay, fantastic. I think with this question, we we had reached the end of the webinar. Actually, we are already at the top of the hour, so anyway, this is the time to close. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today in this webinar. Thank you, Ugo, for the insights that you gave on what you see on the field from your customers, and helping me managing this webinar. And also, you will find this online on gigam.com as a recorded webinar for on demand in the next few days, and you will receive a copy via email. And what else? Thank you very much, and bye bye.